Thank you, Bruce, for inviting me to contribute to this series. I very much appreciate the opportunity. I very much like your idea that co-presencing can be applied to the field of interreligious relationships. Roy Bhaskar used the term to express the idea that all things indwell or dwell within each other. You say that the term co-presencing has the potential to deliver a non-reductionist, ontologically realist model of spirituality, which allows for the acknowledgement of both the implicit unity of traditions and of their richly differentiated modes of being, forms of realisation, and evolving vision spaces and horizons. Ecumenical and interreligious and interspiritual dialogues can reveal commonalities in terms of rituals, observances, teachings, scriptures, philosophies, worldviews, sacraments, communal celebrations, ethics, teaching and involving young people, social activities, social justice and welfare activism and outreach, environmental concerns and activism, etc. I would like to see more shared participation in interreligious rituals. Ken Wilber claims that religions have diverse surface features and common deep features. We may see hidden aspects of our own religion through contact, dialogue with, and experience of other religions and their practitioners. Raimon Panikkar's idea of mutual fecundation or cross-fertilization between religions is a very useful one. Panikkar was a great interreligious and intercultural philosopher who was born in Spain in 1918 and died there in 2010. He had a Catholic Catalan mother and a Hindu Indian father, so both religions were in his heritage. He was a Catholic priest who lived much of his life in India and taught in universities in Europe and the US. At one stage, after he returned to Europe from India, he said, "I started as a Christian. I discovered I was a Hindu, returned as a Buddhist without ever ceasing to be a Christian." He wrote about 50 books and 900 papers. He had astonishing erudition and was fluent in about 10 languages. Panikkar says that there is no Christian doctrine that one cannot more or less find in Hinduism, for example, the Trinity, the Incarnation, love of one's neighbour, the resurrection. Likewise, there is no general Hindu doctrine that cannot be interpreted in a Christian way, e.g. karma, liberation. He speaks of homeomorphic equivalence, not of first-order analogies. Homeomorphic means fulfilling a similar function, e.g. Christ in Christianity and Krishna in Hinduism. He says religions are like languages. They all sound like mindless gibberish when we do not know them. However, when we begin to learn more than one language, we see their peculiarities stand out and understand how each possesses its own individual sap or essence, while awareness of their similarities and analogies grow. One of his many books is called Religion and Religions. He says that the problem of the future of religions is not that of the religion of the future. Our ordinary concept of religion does not apply to a large part of contemporary systems of belief that nevertheless are legitimate religious forms. The concept of religion cannot be applied to the majority of ideologies and religious concepts in the contemporary world. However, some of these are also different ways of being religious. For example, Marxism, humanism, science, art, capitalism, etc. Religions don't have a monopoly on religion. He says that contemporary consciousness often finds that much of the dogmas and ethical precepts of the traditional religions don't correspond to the original function of these religions. For example, the salvation, liberation of humanity, its happiness and fullness, its realization. Many contemporary problems, for example, the climate crisis, hunger and poverty, the coronavirus, war, refer to religious problems that touch the ultimate structures of humanity, societies, and reality. This has led to a chasm between religiousness and religion. In a pluralistic society, the traditional concept of religion is unable to supply meaning to the totality of human life, and it becomes just a private reality or a religion of the state, like a civic religion. He suggests that we need to consider the importance and the urgency of finding a notion of religion that is neither disconnected from nor identified with any particular religion. Traditional concepts of religion are in crisis. Human beings are naturally religious, ever thirsty for something more. But traditional religions are no longer satisfying this, except in orthodox communities and enclaves. The concept of religion cannot be overcome by the negation of religion. He thinks that to combat religion is already a religious act. To believe in nothing except the exclusively empirical, for example, constitutes another religious doctrine. In the contemporary pluralistic and intercultural situation, we need mutual fecundation among the different traditions of the world, including the secular, the modern, and the postmodern traditions. The word religion denotes a symbol rather than a concept. This means that it is much richer and more polysemic, that is, with multiple meanings than a concept. It requires dialogical dialogue, which is open and welcoming, a willingness to love another as she is, without trying to convert her to my ideas. It suggests a willingness for mutual learning and enrichment. He also speaks of being open to religious interpenetration and mutual influencing of the different religions in order to achieve authentic pluralism. He claims that religion in the wider sense is a human transcendental which goes along with all the other activities of human life, not a separate category of activities. In this sense, Religion can be defined as the dimension of ultimacy of the human being. The crisis of humanity's religious consciousness is both effect and cause of our cultural crisis. This is related to John Vervaeke's idea of the meaning crisis. Culture gives religion its language, and religion gives culture its ultimate content. Over the last couple of centuries, both have been attacking each other and both are in crisis. We need a mutation in the meaning of the word religion to reflect more our religious and cultural pluralism. He suggests that it should include an idea of sacred secularity. The religion of the future is above all a personal religiousness, not necessarily individual, and not a single unique religious confession. He sees the religion of the future as having a liberating character, supporting harmony between persons and between peoples. He doesn't think that there will ever be a universal religion. Religion will be more of a personal religiousness with as many different manifestations as there are different persons. The novelty of the religion of the future will recognize the plurality of interpenetration and the freedom of personal conscience. This can be related to what Jordan Hall calls sovereignty. He sees religiousness as a personal dimension of humanity. There will still be religious groups, but the personal interpretation of life and of its meaning for each person will become more important. This does not mean an individualistic interpretation of religion. It still requires communities, organisations, groups, and dialogues. He thinks that religion should not just be a subjective devotion. It requires listening to others, including the community, the traditions, and sacred writings, the poor and the marginalised, the call of the planet, etc. Panikkar claims that the religion of the future is a cosmotheandric religiousness or spirituality. It must bring together the three ultimate dimensions of reality. One, the material and corporeal or even cosmic aspect. Two, the human aspect, including all human activities. Three, the recognition of the divine, the mystical, the mystery with a capital M. Religion will need to bind together the human person with God, but also with the whole universe. Religion must not be the specialization of the few or restricted to a sacred sphere. It must permeate all reality, becoming central to human life without dominating anything. Instead, it should link all spheres of reality together, rather than be tied to any specialized institutions. Panikkar thinks that India may have a leading role in the coming transformations of consciousness, largely because it has always been pluralistic. He is not advocating a transcendental unity of religions, but rather the transcendental concurrence of religions. Each religion, by its very nature, expresses in its own unique way what it considers religion to be, whatever beliefs it may be founded on. He says that we may define religion as the set of symbols, ideas, and practices that are believed to guide us towards the ultimate meaning of life, whatever that may be. Each religion will embody this belief in its own unique way. He envisages a religious transformation. On the one hand, the overcoming of exclusivism, fundamentalism, absolutism, and every kind of fanaticism. On the other hand, a willingness to cooperate whenever a common endeavour arises. Many people in human history have always shown this magnanimity, tolerance, and intelligence. But today we are more aware of the presence and value of others, and the urgency of our present day predicament obliges every conscious human being to get their priorities right. He says that the role of religion is fundamental. Ultimately, the problems of humanity are religious ones, not merely economic, environmental, technological, political, or to do with health. We must recognize that in order to attain the glory of God, nirvana, moksha, salvation, a better rebirth, or no rebirth at all, the survival of the human race and all living beings, happiness, justice, freedom, peace, and the like, we need to cultivate a more genuine mystical religiousness. Each religion and each human being is contingent. That is, we can only touch on the absolute at a point. We need to learn from each other through a pluralistic approach, mutual fecundation, and dialogue. Jorge Ferrer's work in this area is around participative pluralism and participative spirituality. He says that the future of world religions will be shaped by spiritually individuated persons engaged in processes of cosmological hybridization in the context of a common spiritual family that honors a global order of respect and civility. He suggests that it should be committed to fostering the eco-socially, politically responsible transformation of the world. I like Ferrer's use of the term mystery with a capital M as a conceptually vague, open-ended and ambiguous term to refer to the non-determined creative energy or source of reality, the cosmos, life, and consciousness. It invites an attitude of intellectual and existential humility and receptivity to the great unknown. I also think that his term open naturalism is relevant to a discussion about the future of religion and spirituality. In his latest book, Participation and the Mystery, he uses the term to include scientific naturalism as well as being open to a multi-dimensional cosmos of a rich variety of subtle worlds or realms. He uses the term subtle to refer to any possible coexisting or co-enacted world of energy and consciousness, as well as the phenomena or entities associated with their world. He proposes three possibilities in regard to these possible worlds. One, the physical world may be one among many other possible worlds, coexisting in a multi-dimensional cosmos. Two, some of these subtle worlds and their corresponding inhabitants may exist independently from human interaction. Three, other subtle worlds may have been historically enacted by sustained collective religious practice and experience in interaction with the mysteries, generative powers, and perhaps with some non-human beings having enactive capabilities. This picture may begin to do better justice to the rich diversity of humanity's experiences of subtle worlds and beings. He suggests that the physical and the subtle worlds are ultimately united, possibly interacting in complex ways in the context of a seamless multiverse modulated by different degrees, frequencies, or density states of consciousness and energy. He calls for a co-creative, collaborative effort for the unfolding of a participatory spirituality. Dustin DiPerna's very good book, Evolution's Ally, Our World's Religious Traditions as Conveyor Belts of Transformation, looks at Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism as conveyor belts. Dustin makes a case in his book that religious practitioners in all the world's major religions can be found at all the major levels of development: magic red, mythic amber, rational orange, pluralistic green, and integral turquoise. He says that probably the single biggest thing we can do to promote developmental religious pluralism is to expand the current definition of religious freedom. A broader definition must not only protect the various religious traditions, it must also protect and promote each level of development within each tradition. He suggests that religious leaders should begin to map out all the relevant developmental levels within their traditions. They must signify to their followers that all stages of religious orientation are acceptable and welcome. He also talks of the importance of interreligious dialogue. Participants in interreligious dialogue probably need to be at the pluralistic level of development at least. Engaging in these activities helps participants to develop a more pluralistic religious orientation and worldviews, and also helps their respective traditions to develop. They could include interreligious ritual participation. He also sees religions as playing important roles in global issues, for example, the environment, peace and security, pandemics, etc. Ken Wilber, in his wonderful recent book, The Religion of Tomorrow, writes about the future of religion. Wilber's key idea in this book is that religion is unique in that it is the only human institution which can act as a conveyor belt to take human beings through all the stages of development, from birth to death and all the stages in between. He is advocating a deliberately developmental approach to religion and spirituality. He says, for example, that the states and stages of meditation are themselves interpreted in terms of the structures of development which a person is at while experiencing or moving through the meditative states. E.g., the subtle state of meditation can be interpreted magically, mythically, rationally, pluralistically, and integrally. This is happening already in the various religions. For example, practitioners of Christian meditation may interpret their experiences and practices at any of these major stages of consciousness. However, this is not generally happening in a deliberate way in which people are aware of these stages. This means that very often the center of gravity within these communities remains at an orthodox level, which limits their appeal and openness to a fuller range of possibilities. Wilber claims that religion and spirituality have the most important and core functions to act as a conveyor belt for the developmental levels of increased spiritual understanding and awareness, the development of consciousness itself, all the way from the instinctual mind to the super integral stages and every level in between. This includes spiritual intelligence, which can help people to plug into the process and stages of growing up spiritually, while state practices are also very important to help people to become more awake and aware, which are interpreted by the degree of spiritual growing up the person has reached so far. In his book, Wilber also discusses other aspects of the religion of the future, such as how religion shows up in all four quadrants, and what are some of the shadow aspects of each level of development. He also has some discussions about multiple lines of development as they apply to religions. The religions themselves can also be considered as various types. I see these as very important contributions which spirituality and religion can make to help people and humanity to reach our fuller potential. Each religion will need to develop curricula for each stage of development. Wilber, in his earlier book, Integral Spirituality, speaks of the need for 21st century new religions, religious movements and communities which have started to develop in this age of rapidly expanding sciences, especially in the areas of cosmology and evolution, as well as fluency with computer technologies, the internet, social media, online courses, video connectivity, etc. He also introduces the term post-metaphysical spirituality and religion, a turn towards phenomenological, that is first-person experiences, and hermeneutic, that is shared cultural interpretations and understandings of interior states and stages, rather than ontological claims about the nature of reality. Psychospiritual technologies, e.g. yoga, meditation, contemplation, mindfulness, tai chi, rituals, dance, music, entheogenic substances, walking, exercises, energy work, and various forms of new technologies working directly on brainwaves, virtual reality tools, etc., will all become more important. Religions and spiritualities of the future will need an integral philosophy able to provide a comprehensive framework while conscious of the limitations of rationality and reason in the face of trans-rational experiences and stages. Christopher Harish Wallis is a contemporary classical Tantra scholar, teacher, and practitioner. He has now founded the Tantrika Institute, which is an example of a contemporary spiritual or religious community which is solidly grounded in classical Tantra scriptures, oral and written teachings, practices, philosophers, and lineages. It now has a very active Facebook group of about 8,000 members. The Tantrika Institute will have a diverse faculty and will offer courses across the range of classical Tantra, including Shaivite, Hindu, and Buddhist Tantra. I have just about completed its foundation course. The Institute will have 7 streams of learning: view, non-dual philosophy, awareness cultivation, the energy body, living in the world, deity yoga and puja, mantra science, and yogic lifestyle. They describe this as a fully integrated path for life. These courses may be taken over several years to a varying degree of depth, intensity, and comprehensiveness, up to and including at teacher training certificate and degree level. Heritius' teachings have a post-metaphysical flavour. That is, he talks about the energy body as the interactions between the physical body and the psyche. He also discusses deities in similar ways. He is very much aware of current developments in quantum science, cosmology, psychology, environmental and gender issues, etc. This seems to me to be a very relevant new spiritual community for our times. It will include new forms of participation, learning and communication, including online Facebook groups and courses, in-person retreats and workshops, meet-up groups, tours to India and a retreat centre in Portugal. I am also personally getting very interested in Hinduism. It is a very broad, inclusive, pluralistic religion with deep roots in contemplation, meditation, and folk earthbound wisdom, as well as rich scriptures, mythologies, narratives, philosophies, rituals, and a vast range of communities, temples, gurus, and practices. Panikkar says that Indian philosophy has a relevance beyond its traditional boundaries, especially in its contribution to intercultural and world philosophy. Indian philosophers can be well equipped to play a leading role in India and the world, as they understand classical Indian culture, Western civilization, and non-Western cultures, as well as modernity and post-modernity. Again, he says that Indian philosophy can have a creative encounter with the other philosophical worldviews only by means of an authentic dialogical dialogue. I think that world philosophies will play big roles in the future of religions and spirituality. I attended the Parliament of the World's Religions in Melbourne in 2009. It was a wonderful week-long event, probably the greatest week of my life, with over 6,000 participants from all over the world and representing around 200 religions. Since then, there have been similar gatherings in Salt Lake City and Toronto. I see the Parliament of the World's Religions as having a big role to play in the religions of the future and in bringing them together. I attended the last World Congress of Philosophy in Beijing in 2018. Philosophies of religion from many religious traditions were represented and presented there. I anticipate more of this, much more of this, at the next one to be held in Melbourne in 2023. Thankfulness and gratitude are common features of all religions. Another common theme is that of awareness of awareness. Wilber talks of the awareness of a simple feeling of being. Harish talks of the awareness of a simple feeling of being you, of being me. With awareness of our innate essence, nature, and goodness comes love and expressions of compassion and solidarity with all beings and action in the world. There is a need for what John Vervaeke calls the fundamental faith or trust or confidence in reality. Similarly, Raimon Panikkar talks about cosmic confidence in reality. Both, I think, are referring to a fundamental message transmitted by most of the world's religions. This needs to be reformulated in more contemporary, secular, naturalistic terms, such that the universe can be understood as unfolding perfectly the way it is, while leaving room and space for compassion for all the suffering in the world. Awareness and compassion must go together. Harish talks about trusting in life and the unfolding processes of the universe. I am a practicing Catholic and Christian meditator, so I am very interested in evolutionary and developmental transformations of consciousness within Christianity, and particularly within the Catholic Church. Structural changes in the Catholic Church are needed in the lower right quadrant. For example, the ordination of women, married clergy, the recognition and blessing of same-sex relationships and marriages. However, they are blocked by a top-down hierarchical amber structure. I see more evolution within Catholicism in the lower left cultural quadrant, with integral thinkers and religious practitioners like Teilhard de Chardin, Richard Rohr, Ilya Delio, B. Griffiths, Raimon Panikkar, Thomas Merton, Father Thomas Keating, Brother David Stenville Rast, Father Lawrence Freeman, as well as practitioners in other Christian denominations like Paul Smith and Cynthia Bourgeot, as well as many small meditative and contemplative groups and communities. Also, many Catholic and other Christian universities these days have theological and philosophical courses with academic rigor and pluralistic, non-sectarian course content, proceeding into at least postmodern green and even integral stages. Religions are not going to go away anytime soon. According to the Pew Research Center, 3 of the world's major religions, Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism, are all expected to substantially grow in numbers over the next 40 years, Buddhist numbers are forecast to decline in absolute numbers, mainly because of their low birth rate in countries like China, Thailand, and Japan. Religiously non-affiliated, or knowns, are expected to slightly decline in global percentages, although increasing slightly in absolute numbers. By 2060, the unaffiliated population is expected to reach 1.2 billion, but as a share of all people in the world, religious knowns are projected to decline from 16% of the world's population in 2015 to 13% in 2060. While the unaffiliated are expected to continue to increase as a share of the population in much of Europe and North America, people with no religion will decline as a share of the population in Asia, where 75% of the world's religious knowns live. Geographical differences like these play a major role in patterns of religious growth. Indeed, one of the main determinants of future growth is where each group is geographically concentrated today. For example, the religiously unaffiliated population is heavily concentrated in places with aging populations and low fertility, such as China, Japan, Europe, and North America. By contrast, religions with many adherents in developing countries, where birth rates are high and infant mortality rates generally have been falling, are likely to grow quickly. Much of the worldwide growth of Islam and Christianity, for example, is expected to take place in sub-Saharan Africa. In summary, my view is that the future of religion may be pluralistic, integral, cosmotheandric, tantrik, participative, and co-enactive, interreligious and interspiritual, post-metaphysical, including sacred secularity and open naturalism, in dialogue with and supported by the best of world philosophies and scholarship, in dialogue and cooperation with science, including neuroscience, evolution, and cosmology, containing psychospiritual technologies and practices for waking up, both individual and collective, committed to social, economic, and environmental justice and transformation, including sex and gender diversity and equality. And that's about it, Bruce. Thank you very much.